Norman Rockwell was yesterday, and that when Daddy gets up to carve the family turkey on Thanksgiving, he may be presiding over a table that includes children from another marriage. Or he may be including a table that includes relatives. And she, if she's the stepmother, may not only have her own children, but children that were inherited. It's very complicated, and it also is impacting in a significant way on this culture and on millions of people in it. What is the responsibility of the so-called extended, or you rather use the word what, collated? Collateral family. All right, we'll talk about how we identify this and what are some of the things we should look for. For example, what are the responsibilities of a person to his ex-wife's parents? Those are your children's grandparents. Are you still talking with them? How often? What are your feelings about them? Can they visit you? And how do they feel about the new wife? And how will that feeling reflect itself on the children? And what is our responsibility to grandparents? How much visitation should grandparents have when the daughter has divorced the husband, but the children are... It goes on and on. Now, let me just... Here's what we're going to try and do on this program. We have with us two... how do I want to say this? We have two families who have divorced, and some of whom have remarried, but they all live in the same community, and they visit each other frequently. Let me start here. You're the LAHRs? Oh, you used to be. No, how? All right, yeah, you still a LAHR. Okay. The LAHRs, Jan and John. No, that's not right either.
No, I'm Karen.
All right. Yeah, this is going to be. All right. This is their family. Two children, just like the front of Family Circle magazine, huh? All right. And these are, or used to be, the Wards and their two children. All right. Now, what you have to know for the purpose of our program here, and to give you a chance to chat, we need a program for this. We should have numbers and jerseys. These folks are divorced, and these folks are also divorced. So I'll ask you then to, you have not remarried. Okay, so would you be good enough to stand over here all by yourself then? I want to make you feel. All right. You're living in a house by yourself. Okay. And you are the new Mrs. Ward. Mrs. LAHR, I'm sorry. Okay. You're Mrs. Ward. Okay, would you be good enough to... All right. All right, if you'll just stand here. Now, we'll move the children in a moment. You're married now. All right? Okay, and then you're the fourth adult player in this little drama here. Okay. Now, you are the LAHRs. Okay. Now, where are the children? Okay, but isn't there permanent, we don't call this permanent custody then?
Essentially, yes, all four of them live with us, but we try to share them as much as possible.
So for the purpose of visually identifying this, then these children should be over here, right? Is that right? Would you be good enough to stand in front? I know that you don't, okay. You're a little reluctant because you don't want to, you're not the exclusive owners of these kids, is your point. I understand. But they are with you most of the time, is that right? They live at your house. Okay. Is that clear? You got it. What's your first question? Huh? You got it, didn't you? I mean, I have to do this again, do I? What?
My first question is, can you go over that part in the middle again? Okay, now what do we have here? Yeah. We have the LAHRs, the Wards. Now, who are you?
Well, she used to be his wife. All right, see, she has not remarried. So we've got here 3 houses now. Yeah. Yes.
I'd like to feel if they feel that they have 2 mamas.
All right, we'll be happy to ask that question. It's a very honest question. But first we've got to get them all mic'd. For the purpose of our establishing what was going on here, we tried to visually, and this is not to be theatrical about this. These are very serious adult people who care not only about their own well-being and the well-beings of their ex-spouses, but the well-beings of their children as well. And they are also happy to share with you what they think might be important information for anybody who finds himself in this situation. Stepchildren, former spouses, what's the relationship, what's the dynamic going on, what are the special prejudices that are brought to this situation, how do you get over them, What is the excess baggage? Does the stepchild remind you of a past relationship that your mate might have had? And is that good for your marriage? And does it help? And what are your... Huh? We hope you'll join us. You know, the point, you all live in a community in California, so you're very close, and obviously there's wonderful, apparently wonderful communication between all of you. How am I doing, huh?
Occasionally we have issues, but by and large I think things work very well.
You wanted to make what point? That you've kept your name Ward, you're Ms. Ward, and you're living alone, but you're not living alone. It depends. You want to make the point, what? It depends on what weekend, whether or not you're
right.
alone.
You asked where the children are. It really depends on which weekend are you talking about, because the children go back and forth on a very regular schedule.
Yeah.
So some weekends I'm living alone, some weekends I'm a mother with children.
Well, even during the midweeks, the kids are with us Tuesday and Thursday. So we have them every other weekend, and then Tuesday and Thursday, and lots of times in between.
Right. Do we have PA on all these mics down here, friends? I'm not sure they can hear in the back row. Is there a problem here? We can't hear in the studio. That's kind of important if we're going to make informed questions here.
Okay, I think the important thing is that every other weekend the kids are with the other parents, and during the weeknights, there's one night during the week when each child has one-on-one with one of their other parents, so that they're living with us full-time, except on alternate weekends, and then on each Tuesday and Thursday, one child has one-on-one time for dinner and maybe for the night with the parent that they're not living with regularly.
Yeah.
I'd like to emphasize that I think we shouldn't have waited for divorce to do this. It's turned out to be very excellent for all of us to have a special time with one child, and I wish I had done it before.
You also are making the point, Sandy, that you were 7 years a mom. Is that it? I mean, a full-time mom. And there were a lot of those years you were not a happy person.
I was not a happy person, therefore I could not be a happy mom or wife.
And now you feel, now that you're free of this unhappiness, you're talking to your kids in a much better way, huh?
Much better. I really like being a part-time mother, and I think it's not just so much the change of the divorce and the motherhood role. And a lot of things have changed in my life, and I just feel better about myself, and from that everything else flows.
Yes.
That's my version.
You can understand our curiosity about, apparently you knew each other before. Is that right, before the divorces? Were you
Yeah. I've
friends?
known Karen and John for probably 15 years. And I knew and respected Karen completely separate from this arrangement. And I think that probably makes it very easy to respect her as the step-parent of my children. It makes it comfortable.
What is it that... I guess we're all looking for free advice here. What were the surprises? What is it about this blended family situation that creates the biggest distractions? Can you help us on some of those?
I think even before we go into that, one of the important things to recognize is that what we have is a blended family for the kids. The kids get to be with their natural parents who happen to be separate at different times. We all happen to live in the same community, and we've done that by choice because all of the parents feel that it's very important for the kids to have the parents around, and that we keep a relationship among the adults enough to be able to deal with the kids on a regular basis. We don't see each other socially as different groups, or this group up here. This is the first time we've all sat together in a room in a long time. It's an extended family for the children. The children get the benefit of the present family situation and of their natural parents if they're not in the present family situation.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we keep things quite separate in terms of these three households.
Yeah, I want to ask about with the kids, about disciplining. You know, if they're at one house, whose responsibility, or how would you discipline them? I mean, it seems like, I know Jan has a few kids, and when I have them, and if just for the day or that, it seems kind of hard to discipline them.
Right.
Just
You married a woman who has children.
No, I'm dating one. I'm not married. No,
So you want to know just what kind of authority do you have, and you don't want to overstep it, you don't want to, I get it.
Right.
We have, Peter and I, fortunately, our philosophy in raising children is very similar. And so between us, we always have the agreement that the other parent has the full right to discipline the child as we would. And we back each other up. Fortunately as well, certainly with Jan and John, I think their approaches to handling the children are very similar. And so we haven't had large philosophical differences, I don't think, on how to handle the children. And that's one reason why I think it works as well as it does.
I was wondering, we were told earlier that the grandmother was in the audience. I would like to know how the relationship with her grandchildren is now. I want to know if it's been dented at all. You know, has there been any change?
Well, it's been wonderful.
Hang on just a moment, Grandma. We didn't talk about discrimination. Well, you don't. That's a good question, though, and you have rights. Grandmas have rights too. So you're saying you don't think it has changed?
No, I feel very happy about the whole situation. I'm very proud of everybody and the way they're dealing with each other. I think it's just marvelous.
Yes, there does appear to be an awful lot of energy here directed at the well-being of the kids and also to each other.
Yes, there is.
Well, I think the other part of that as well is that Peter has custody of the children, so I don't think there was any danger of Ruth losing touch with the children.
And you're Peter's mother?
Yes.
Yes.
Whereas, for instance, in perhaps John's parents' case, that question might be a little bit more appropriate. And we've tried, and since we're 3,000 miles from both my family and John's family, we've kept up communications very closely. I feel very close to John's parents. That was a question that was asked before, brought up. We see them. We were just in New York, and they came and saw the children, and I don't think that that's changed.
No, and even like last summer, we visited to the east, and Karen and I visited with Nils and Taya at John's parents' house and stayed there for a couple of days, and they were very gracious and just loved the chance to be with their grandchildren.
This is a terrible way to identify you, but you're the one outsider in this situation. How are you doing? Is this your first marriage?
Yes.
So you have you've been asked to accommodate a lot. You know, you've already got all of you inherit all of the history, you inherit the good things too, and it's clear that there's a lot of good here. But I'm curious to know about your attitudes and feelings and what little mountains you had to climb on this thing.
Big mountains.
Really? Like?
Well, it was a complete adjustment of lifestyle. I went from an apartment with one cat to, having the kids around and the dogs and the station wagon and suburbia and the whole bit.
Yeah.
And becoming an instant parent was very difficult. I hadn't been around children. I didn't really, I didn't know if they could cross the street by themselves. So that I really had to somehow work into that and get to know the kids and learn parenting skills. I just didn't have any, and that was difficult. I think the hardest thing was that I had no role model. You hear about Cinderella's wicked stepmother. I don't really feel like that fits, but I'm not the kid's mother. They have one.
Yeah.
And I spent a long time kind of floundering around looking to find out what my role really was and what kind of a relationship we'd have. I liked the kids, but I knew I wasn't their mother.
Yeah.
I wasn't a friend yet even because we didn't have enough history, and it's beginning to evolve, but I found it very difficult.
You know, what's important about what you're saying is, and we appreciate very much your honesty, all the thousands of people in your situation, or who are going to be in your situation.
Oh, I had just a horrendous experience. The first year that we were married, I was really struggling trying to find out what my identity was in all of this. And I read an article about the Step Family Association and went to one of their meetings, and this woman got up at the luncheon and described to me in detail. She put all these pieces together of the last 6 months of my life.
She was talking about you.
Yeah, and I thought, hey, I'm normal. What I'm feeling is what other people feel. And it was just incredibly reassuring.
And the tendency during the courtship is to say, don't worry, honey, for you and me and you and happiness and we will survive. But it's important not to get distracted by the euphoria of a newly developing relationship and to talk about it, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Did you?
But then again, we did. I'm not sure.
But neither one of us expected what was going to happen. I sort of thought, well, this might be hard, but I really didn't know what role Jan was going to play for sure. You sort of assume that it'll be just like her mother, sort of, with maybe my taking a greater share than maybe most men would. But, you don't expect all the sort of emotional level that gets involved.
Right. You know what would be a difficult thing is when you and your wife are having a problem, for example, when you're having a squabble, say, and then he's real nice to his kids.
It doesn't ring a bell at all. It doesn't.
Have you ever been jealous of the attention he's given?
Oh no. The only thing I've ever been jealous of was my time that I was giving. You know, I was really happy in the beginning at the times John would go away with the kids and I could be by myself, because I found that very, very difficult to adjust to all these people constantly.
And you wanted a time out.
Well, even when the kids aren't with us, all of our plans are based around the times when they will be there. We don't get babysitters when they're there because you don't have your kids visit and then go away, so that everything is arranged according to the children in the schedule with that.
Yeah. Yes, Stan?
Mr. Ward, okay, Miss Ward 1 and Miss Ward 2, you known each other for 15 years? When did Mr. Ward come in, or change hands, should I say?
Well, John and I went to graduate school together in New York. And then we both happened to be working out in California.
You two guys were school chums then?
In graduate school.
Graduate school.
We said school chums, but we were in graduate school together. And so we were in the same general area. We knew of each other and at a few parties. In 1976, Sandy and I decided to separate and get divorced. And then I was a single parent for a year with the 2 children. In much the same kind of situation with alternate weekends, but I had custody of them. And then Karen got divorced. Karen and John got divorced about a year later. And then a year after that, it's about 3 years ago now, Karen and I got married.
One more statistic. I don't want to bore you. 4 out of 5 divorced people, I don't know if this is true with women and men, I know it's true with men, marry within 3 to 5 years following the issuance of their divorce decree. And 40% of those second marriages fail. There is an alarming statistic of divorce in second marriages. And that's another reason why what you're doing is really important.
Well, I think the important thing in divorce, when you face divorce and you finally decided it's the only alternative. I mean, this isn't something one should take lightly. Then the question is, when you go through the divorce, is this a growing experience, or is it a time when you take all of your pain and all of your aches and try to blame the other person for it? Is it a time when you step up and say, okay, I must have been 50% of this, I'm going to straighten myself out and grow? And if you're really anxious to grow with a divorce and go through the growth and take the time that's necessary for you, it may be 6 months, it may be 10 years.
Yeah.
You may decide you never want to get remarried again. But the important thing is whether you can really face up to that as an individual and say, okay, I've got some problems here too. I'm going to try to straighten those out. I'm going to try to understand what went wrong. I mean, Sandy and I, for example, spent 6 months intensively trying to understand what the causes of the problems were before we split, to try to really get at it with professional help.
That's real important. And this probably deserves a little more definition, but if a person finds him or herself with a divorced person and finds, let's pretend the man finds that he's attracted to let me do it the other way. Let's pretend a woman finds she's attracted to a divorced man.
Yes.
Now, all right, okay, this obviously didn't happen with you. All right. Now you're in the candlelight and wine situation.
Yes.
And that's terrific. We're all happy for you. But here's the lesson. If he's spending a lot of time talking about all those awful things that his wife did to cause the breakup of their marriage, raise your eyebrow. Wonder about this guy. Isn't that good advice?
I was going to say, I don't remember ever having that happen. I think we had the wine and the candlelight, but we were talking about our relationship.
And he wasn't in the full-time business of trying to explain to you why he was this victim of this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No.
But a lot of people do that.
Well, you have to work that out of your system first. I mean, anybody that's been divorced and been out in the single scene after that knows that when you first come out of a divorce, you're a wreck. And the last person you want to date is somebody who just came out of a divorce. But if you can work yourself through that, and then take the positive aspects. I mean, what Karen and I spent a lot of our time on was calling each other on when we recognized that something was a little different or something that we didn't like before, and working it through. I mean, we came at it with the education and the experience, which we didn't have at 19 or 20 when we got married, initially. And if you can come at it with that growth perspective and build from there.
Okay, just one more point. You don't socialize. That's asking too much, and it also can, okay. But you, obviously, you are very open to communication regarding the kids, obviously.
Well, I think for all of us, the bottom line in this whole relationship is the children and their well-being and their emotional stability. And it's not by happenstance, really, that we live in the same community. It's by the fact that we feel that's best for the children. And no matter what our personal feelings may be at times, that's number one.
Right. Just one more time. Now, these 4 children who are offspring of 2 marriages spend, obviously, one of the conscientious things you're doing here is ensuring that the children see their parents all the time, but, or very often. They are in your house.
We have most of the responsibility, going to the dentist, the music lessons, the after-school activities. Those pretty much rest on our shoulders.
And they're your children by a previous marriage and your children by a previous marriage.
But we still think of them now, to some degree, as ours.
That's why many people get hung up on now, which one are your children and which one are her children and so on.
And you're saying that's not an important question?
No. We really don't think that. And in fact, it always kind of brings us back to this rude shake to reality when somebody asks that question, because there is such a close family togetherness. That's great. I mean, the kids get along extremely well. And we really feel we operate as a family. And when the kids go off in another situation, that's also very much of a family approach for them.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
How does your parents feel about the children?
They're developing a relationship. I think they had a similar thing to what I had in that these, here were 2 children, they're their first grandchildren, and they really had never had that role before, and it's been a gradual thing.
But like all parents, I shouldn't put a prejudice on them whether I don't even know them. But that's got to be, nobody is out looking for a divorced man for his daughter, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So you've got, so you've got that to deal with. That's another pressure, right?
Yeah.
He wants you to marry somebody in medical school, have your own family.
How do you handle holidays? Don't they get a little messy, or do you have like 3 Christmases at, each house? How does
The kids love it.
Yeah, it's worked out really well, because like when I came into the family, I didn't have a history of holiday celebrations, and so we take the kids on Christmas Eve, and then they're with Karen and Peter in the morning on Christmas, so that we have started our own traditions.
Yeah.
And
who supports these children when you have them just about the same length of time?
Well, it varies depending on the family. I support these 2 children, and John helps a great deal with the support of Taya and Niels in terms of financial support.
I'd like to ask, is there ever a time when you feel that this is an awkward situation and you'd really like to have them all for yourself? Just you 2.
There are times. There are times.
Well, I'm sure there are times you'd like to get rid of all of them, too, huh?
That's right. I think the other side of that is that the alternate weekends when the children are gone, we have a chance to have a relationship, an adult relationship, which few parents really can enjoy.
Yeah, both Karen and I work full-time, and so it's important to have some of that free time as well as to have the free time with the kids.
Yes.
Okay, this is not a question, but just how great that they love their kids enough to sacrifice so much. Sure, they have ego problems and everything, but everything is for the kids.
Yeah, do you think...
I don't think that there's sacrifice in that sense. I mean, I don't feel like it amounts to much.
You're saying that you think most of us can do this, is what you're saying.
We're doing what's best. I'm doing what's best for myself
super
as well
about
as what I think is best for kids. Yeah, exactly.
Huh?
He doesn't have them all the time. It's interesting to me that this couple has taken all 4 of them with the dental appointments, the medical things, all that, which is a tremendous responsibility.
But it's something that we would be happy to have, and it's just the way it's worked out.
You would accept that responsibility?
Yeah.
See, I appreciate your comments. They're honest, but we are tempted to place judgments on people without kids.
Curious to know, that's why.
That's one of the prejudices that all of us have to get over in order to speak to these problems.
I think for me,
I mean, look at it. Now look at this. Here's Mama living alone. So we've got to, yeah, but we've got to assume that there's a certain segment of the population out there. Look at herself. You know, all mothers would like to live alone occasionally, and she's doing it. But don't you bring a little resentment toward her for that?
But there's another side of it. What about the fathers who have the right to have custody?
That's right.
You know, I think.
Yeah. No, there was there was no custody litigation here. Let me bore you just a little more. So for those of you who may have joined us late, these are the original pairs. Karen was married to John. Sandy was married to Peter. All right, living in two different houses, just like married folks. Now, Karen and John divorce, and Jan marries John. I got it?
Mm-hmm. Right.
All right.
Not time sequentially, but you got the right.
All right. And Karen married Peter.
Well, first, yeah.
Sorry about my artwork. All right. And Sandy went to live alone. All of the children live mostly with Karen and Peter, but visit frequently Jan and John, and Mother Sandy, who is not an ex-mother, but is a current mother, but just doesn't have... Do all four ever go with Jan and John?
No.
No. And do all four ever go with Sandy? No. So, two go with Jan and John. You're two, John, when you were married to Karen. All right. Does that help? All right.
I just wanted to know with the children, if they feel bad that they can't take their sister and brother with them over to this family, or how, because they all are together with Karen and Peter, but they're not all together with Sandy or Jan and John.
They're all together with Karen and
They're
Peter.
all together once,
Yeah.
but they have to split up if they want to go see somebody else.
Well, but that can't be a big problem. I mean, your kids don't travel like wooden soldiers all together to every place do they?
No, but they enjoy being with each other. They really do. I was just wondering, I wanted to ask one of the children that.
All right, who wants to talk about that? Nils?
Well, sometimes we feel left alone.
Yeah. Sometimes. Okay, you want to say no to that. Is that right, Taya? What, Nils always complaining, is he? Is it, but the point, appreciate your getting into our show here. That comment can be made by children whose parents are not divorced. How you doing, Chris? Any comments? How do you feel? Are we making sense here? You can understand the curiosity that all of us have because this is happening so much. I'm sure you're aware of that. I shouldn't. So where you're staying is not really a big thing to you, other than it gives you a chance to meet your mom or your dad or talk with them, huh? All right? Yes. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to know how the children feel sitting here now, listening to all this. They seem to take the whole circumstances very, naturally. And yet here they are on TV in front of hundreds of thousands of people.
Tanya, how do you feel about that? Is it uncomfortable for you to be on... Huh?
I don't know.
Is it fun to be on television?
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Yes, sir.
I'd like to address my question to John.
I feel a speech coming here with very little time.
How do you respond to problems of the ex-wife, say in the house, say the plumbing or the heating? If there's a breakdown, how do you respond to that?
Problem where?
In the household.
We each have our own household.
You never go over to fix the plumbing or the light?
She's married. She's already got a plumber.
I fixed some of it myself. Wait a minute.
How about Sandy?
I fixed a lot of my own things. That's one thing I really had to learn on being on my own, how to fix my own car and plumbing. And I've learned I spent a lot of time at the local plumbing store.
An interesting sidelight of that, too, is that when Chris is with Sandy, he often gets to do some of those things, which I might step in and do at home. So there's a definite advantage there.
Right. And we'll be back in just a moment.
I was just wondering if one of the husbands were transferred,
Who would take the children then, like to a different state? I mean, have you ever decided that? It's nice when you're all in the same neighborhood now, but if you were...
And incidentally, there are now lawsuits which enjoin ex-spouses from taking the kids to another state and denying visiting privileges, convenient visiting privileges. It's getting real complicated here, isn't it?
You know, of course, that's our, maybe one of our great fears, that somehow the Karen Peter would be, you know, financially sort of forced to take an opportunity somewhere else. I think that we are, you know, very much opposed to that, because I think the kind of relationship that we have is not visitation kids. We like to think of it as co-parenting with these kids.
We've also, I want to make it clear that both Peter and I have turned down opportunities and transfers with the idea of keeping the children close in mind.
I know you're not all Baptists. Who decides that on their religious training?
I do. When they're with us, they go to Unitarian Church on Sundays.
So that has not been an issue then?
No, we're all close enough in our beliefs.
I'd like to ask the children of Jan if they feel as if Jan is a mother to them.
Could you repeat that for me?
Well, do you feel that Jan is a mother to you? I mean, how do you identify Jan? Yep, that's all right. Yeah, it's on. Good check there. How do you think of Jan as a mom?
Sometimes not.
Yeah. Sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. Yeah. All right. Yes.
How do the children...
How do you want to stand?
How do the children address the new parent? By the first name, or as a daddy, another one papa, and another one by another name? How do you decide that?
Well, that's interesting. We took the policy of not deciding and letting the kids do what they felt comfortable with. Taya and Nils call Peter more often than not Daddy, and Tanya usually calls me Mommy. And sometimes Tanya calls me Karen, but then she calls him Peter, and Chris calls both of us by our first name, so it's been what they've been comfortable.
I get called Peter, Karen.
Yeah.
But it also led to the kids coining the thing Daddy Peter and Daddy John.
Right.
And of course, when they first get back after a weekend, we would often like to be called the wrong name, but that's part of it. But I mean, that's much how they look at it.
They call me Jan, and occasionally it'll be Mommy, which it's fun. I like that, but it's not me. I like Jan because it's my identity, it's who I am, and it gives me the freedom to develop whatever relationship I want, and I think it's much less confusing, too. When we mention Mommy in our household, we know who Mommy is. Yeah. It's much easier.
They all seem to have a fantastic relationship, and I think that's great. I'd like to know how the children feel about having 3 brothers and sisters now instead of just the one that they used to have.
It's almost the same.
Well, I think it'd be fair to say, for example, Chris had a waterbed in a room by himself before the other kids moved in and shared the room with him. And he's many times over the years said, I wish things were the way they used to be, or I wish I could have my waterbed again. And there are many different times when the different I wishes come up. It's also interesting to watch when the girls come back together after a weekend. They get talking and talking till 11 o'clock at night.
Everybody seems to be talking about primarily the adults. I would like to know how the children feel about
I don't know whether it's fair to ask a 5-year-old to express his feelings on but I understand your curiosity. We all have it. These kids look very well balanced and happy to me, and they also look like they are variously crazy about and exasperated with their parents, which has nothing at all to do with whether or not they're divorced.
I'd like to ask Jan and John, do you feel the need to have your own child?
No.
This is something we decided a long time ago, so that's another reason why these children are so important.
I was wondering, you said you live in the same community. Do the children go to the same school?
Yes.
They do.
Yes.
Yes. But all the kids live in the same house.
Yes, I was curious. I wanted to ask Sandy that as a natural mother, why you do not have custody of the children. Did you relinquish custody?
Well, the first question I'd like to be sure you ask that same question of every father who does not have custody. I'm a little bit tired of getting the attention for not having the children, because I really think it's a 50-50 decision. Peter asked for it right in the beginning, and my first rule was I did not want a custody fight. I had seen friends go through that, and I felt very strongly about that. And I also was very confused about which direction I was going. I had a lot of things I had to sort out, and so I kind of sat back and was very passive about a lot of the things that happened that first year. I don't regret them, I just accept that's what...
But you, was there ever any guilt?
Oh, I think there's a lot of guilt tied up with the...
But I mean, we do,
motherhood.
I think your response to the question is a very, very important one, because there is a double standard that somehow the men are free to go get their wine rack and their silk shirts, you know, and the house overlooking the apartment overlooking the city.
He's a very good father. I have very good feelings about the kind of home that he would bring the children up in. I mean, it wasn't ever an issue that I had to keep the children to save them from him. I mean, I think I hear that from some women. And I didn't have those feelings, so it's very natural to agree with his wish to have custody.
I think one of the key things to the fact that we've been able to not go after each other with hatchets all the time is that we did go through a, quote, uncontested divorces. We didn't get lawyers haggling over the details, and we tried to settle it among ourselves to keep it calm so that the kids did not suffer from the divorce.
I'd like to ask Karen, Peter, when the grandparents come over, do they treat them all equal, or did they just treat your own children?
Well, it was a little adjustment right at the beginning, I think, but it's the grandparents. But just getting used to the names and who everybody was. But it's been impressive the way they have responded.
Certainly, my mother has encompassed. She loves grandchildren, and 2 more were that much more of a blessing. So.
Do the children ever want to stay with Karen and Peter for the weekends and not want to go with their mother or father?
Occasionally we've heard some rumblings about that. They'll be right in the middle of building some great structure, and I don't want to be interrupted right now, but with that initial passing of hands...
You know, it would seem to me that communication is even more important here. Your children should know what's going on this coming weekend. You shouldn't be ad-libbing this, is the point. Because that disrupts plans they might have. Well, so you do that, huh?
Yeah, and I suspect as they become teenagers and are more and more independent, there's going to have to be more of that.
Yes, I'd just like to know how do your children react in packing up suitcases and that for the weekend?
How do they react?
Yeah,
They're pretty matter-of-fact about it. I used to pack them for them, but now we say you have to take 2 or 3 days worth of clothes, and they go do it.
Well, plus
there's that problem. I think she said after the weekend, they would be at our house during the weekend, and then maybe go back on Sunday night or Monday morning. And I think there was some stress involved in that transition, and one of the things that we try to do is either do it before dinner or the next morning after they'd just taken to school, rather than do it after dinner, because I think it's a stressful time.
How do you handle their friends? Are they allowed to bring their friends to just Karen and Peter's house, or do they ever bring friends over to your house? Or?
No, they bring whatever
Their friends call whichever. They don't even know where the kids are half the time when we get calls. And
I was wondering, do you ever foresee the custody arrangements changing as the children get older, teenagers, if they'd wish it?
It's certainly something that's always open for re-debate if we feel that that's in the best interests of the children.
I assume as the children mature, you're going to give them more freedom to make decisions of their own.
Absolutely, and it's been nice now because the kids are finally big enough that they can actually bicycle to John's house. So I see the open door policy working more and more, not less and less.
I know, coming from a old-fashioned, stable household, I'll never know how much it meant to me to come from that type of thing as opposed to extended families like this. How much do you see future problems coming up? Like, you watch the kids closely now and in the future. What types of problems do you see coming up because of that?
Teenage problems.
I think what's really important is whether the home life is happy. If the home life is happy and not full of stress, I think that's what's most important. And that's, of course, one of the things you face with the idea of divorce. And but it's very important that we keep it relaxed, and that's the place that's home. And there may be 2 homes, but as long as they're relaxed and not full of stress, that's what's important.
Well, it's important that they now have 2 happy homes instead of 1 unhappy home, which is what they were in before.
I think as far as somebody said, what about changes in the custody arrangement? I think it's important to say that, one of even my concerns on subjecting ourselves to this, which is enjoyable anyway, but it was that we do not have any formula that we know is going to work tomorrow. We only know we've managed somehow to struggle along for the last few years, and we've worked out what we think is a good arrangement, but it is still like a balance, and there's lots of old buttons and raw nerves running around, and so it's not like, and so, like my feeling was, what will it be like? We've never had a discussion like this, and, even in doing this, in looking at it, I was afraid, well, maybe that will just tip some balance some way or the other. So I think we shouldn't give the impression that we got it made and got it
Right. I appreciate that. And you're here, there's something instructive about listening to each other here, isn't it?
Oh,
There's
yeah.
no way to anticipate. There's no script for this, is there?
No.
You wanted to make what point, Sandy, with not much
But I
time?
think that growing up in two different homes will give them an advantage that I didn't have growing up in one home where I thought my mother's way was the only way to do things. I think it's really nice to have the flexibility of going back and forth. It's like going to a friend's house, but you have several mothers, several different ways.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
This is Joan Hamburg, consumer reporter.
Hi, is the caller there?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I have a blended family of 6 children, 2 from my previous marriage and 4 from my husband's previous marriage. And the problem that we're running into is that now 2 of his children have come into our custody, and my 2 children don't want to go with their father much anymore. I wonder if the couples would care to comment on this type of thing.
Your 2 children don't want to be with your present husband?
No, with my former husband. More and more they're objecting to visiting him.
Oh, I see. Visitation they don't want. All right. How old are the kids?
Oh, let's see. We've got 8, 12, 13, 16, and 19.
How old are the children that don't
How old are the children who don't want to visit the old man, the father?
They're 8 and 12.
How old?
8 and 12.
We haven't had that experience. Our children feel very close to all of their parents, and
Yeah.
we just haven't experienced
And
it.
you know, it's in step-family meetings and things, we've heard people in similar situations, and the suggestion I've heard given is the person that is having problem with kids not wanting to come really has to think about how is the time spent, and what would the kids really like to do with them during that time.
And also, it should not be taken personally. I mean, you know, I had kids living with me, my own kids, who often were not altogether crazy about me. What I mean to say is that it's really, I think it's a big mistake to get into a popularity thing about how they want and what they wish. I think 8-year-old kids are very, very entitled to be into themselves and not be interested in anybody over 20 anyway. I don't know whether that makes any sense to the caller. And also that there's on visitation, there's this sort of Disneyland dad thing where you're kind of obliged to be the vacation director, you know, or the recreation director, and that often turns kids off. Any more advice you want to give these folks?
No, I think the key thing in our situation is don't want anybody to get the idea it's easy. That it takes work. It's taken a lot of work, and all the phone calls are not easy to deal with, but it's paying off.
Well, I have 2 sets of stepdaughters or children, and the only one I could identify with would be Jan, I suppose. And I just wonder about the discipline of the children. Do you feel as though you have to overreact when they do something wrong to discipline them, or do they listen?
The way I've dealt with that was in the beginning, I just stood back. I didn't know what to do, and John does most of the child care in the family. I step in when I'm comfortable, and so whatever I've got is a voluntary type of a thing. I was never...
If he wasn't home.
When he's not there, I'm it. But I do find I have trouble, like when there are 4 of us here, I always feel like I'm number 4 and that I'm, you know, the last down the line. But when I'm alone with the kids, I have a completely different feeling with them. In fact, that was when I had a turnaround in my relationship, was one time I was left home with them for 3 days when all the other adults were gone, and that was when it really turned.
For the good.
Oh, yes. It was just, I was playing a role before then, and that was when they became real people. We were really...
Over here.
I'd like to ask Sandy, when you date, do you have like friends over on the weekends when your children are there? How does that work out?
Works out very well.
Think how many people I could get out of all the answers with.
I would like to just congratulate all 5 adults for taking such great...
Really is.
It's excellent, I think.
We'll be back in just a moment. With time to thank this audience and also those people who shared some real loving testimony with us today. Boy, I'll tell you, they'll never accuse you of not loving your kids, all of you. Thank you very much for being here, and I hope you have a nice day. Goodbye, everyone.